Hello.
Good morning. Happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday to you. I'm happy to be here. How about yourself?
So happy to be here. Even though it's already sweltering
Yes.
outside, I'm happy that the AC is working. Thank you.
Yes,
And
agreed.
yeah, shout out to all of the people, all of my friends in the Houston area. I understand you
hmm
have power back on.
Yes.
So, yay for that. Been there, done that through hurricanes. Gone
hmm
without power in the sweltering
It's
heat for
very
10
frustrating,
days.
that's for
So,
sure. So you
yes.
definitely start to appreciate the basics.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it does not heat does not bring out the niceties in
No,
people.
it's true. Oh, well, today I'm excited because we're going to talk about the psychology of pricing. Going to talk about
Yes.
strategies for setting prices for products or services. And of course, our normal format, we have three segments, three tips that hopefully, you know, inspire you to action and things you can put together right now. Because, you know, as I know, when, you start a business out early, pricing is it's a big deal and it's hard to know. And you can look at competitors, but you haven't established your own brand maybe or reputation. So what do you do? And unfortunately, often you only get one chance to do this with a client. If you sell them, if they come on board, the pricing usually happens right then. It's much harder.
Yes.
You can do it a year later, you can reevaluate, but there's one moment usually for that. So,
Yes. Yes.
um,
And it's very, very difficult once you've set that
mhm,
pricing with the customer, if they continue to work with you, and you've decided, oh my gosh, I was so underpriced in the market to kind of
mhm,
raise to where you want to be
yep,
with those current clients, it's very,
mhm,
very difficult.
yes.
So you're
There are
right.
ways for it, right? There are ways to have that honest conversation, but it is definitely much more difficult. So, and
Yes.
by then you probably already lost money or something. You realize that you didn't, do it. So anyway, um, let's dive in. So, why don't you give us tip number one? Let's talk about something we can do this week to fix and figure out pricing when we're starting.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that the whole idea around pricing, especially when you're in a service oriented
Mm-hmm.
business, right? Where you're doing consulting work and it's more that you're delivering your expertise as opposed to a
Right.
product, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it becomes a little bit trickier and harder for people to really pinpoint what should my pricing be going
Yep.
in. So,
Mm-hmm.
tip number one, I would say, is understand your customer value perception. Okay, what is their perspective of your value?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and okay, that sounds great, Deb. But how do I do that? Right?
Right.
It's not your unique value proposition.
Mm-hmm.
We're not there yet. We're looking at it from their perception. What do they value, or
Mm-hmm.
what price would they put on your expertise? Right, to
Mm-hmm.
your point. So it is knowing the competitive landscape, but looking at it from the standpoint of what industry should I be focused on? Because any service based in solution can be specific for certain industries. You don't have to be
Mm-hmm.
completely broad and general. In fact, it's actually better if you do focus on
Mm-hmm.
specific industries and
Right.
become the expert in those industries, right? But it's also, what is the competitive intensity in the marketplace? Are you
Huge.
the only one in your area that is offering that particular solution, or are
Mhm,
there 500 other people
mhm,
offering that solution to that industry?
mhm,
Because then maybe it'll inform you that you want to choose a different industry that has a little less friction to
mhm,
get started and go in that direction. And then also, what are the client demographics? When they're thinking about it, they're looking at what my needs are, what my preferences are in terms of how do I want to solve this problem, right?
mhm,
So, understanding that competitive landscape is the first part of the understanding the customer value perception.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can go into doing an analysis of, who are those competitors, right? Do that Google search, do that social media search, look at industry specific websites if you're going, which industries you're going to focus on, and see who's who's active, who's talking about the same solutions that you're bringing to the table.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, you're always talking about Google My Business. Now's
Mm-hmm.
the time to flip that, right?
Yep.
And go out there and search and see what people are actually talking about in terms of what's the feedback they're giving on
Mm-hmm.
those particular types of services to kind
Yep.
of help inform you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the third caveat underneath that is doing that direct competitor analysis, right?
Mm-hmm.
So once you've identified who those players are, go to their website,
Mm-hmm.
see what they're talking about. How am I going to differentiate, what I'm talking about and what I'm delivering to that customer, right?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to these competitors. Then it becomes at a point where you can create your unique value proposition.
Mm-hmm.
And value is that most important word
Yeah.
in that in
Right.
that in that phrase, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what unique value are you bringing to the table? It could be the experience that you have. It
Mm-hmm.
could be the fact that your parents, you know, owned a company in that industry,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you just grew up around it. You know a lot of people. What the pain points are of
Mm-hmm.
that industry.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't always have to mean that you're going in with 20 years of experience, right,
Right. Right.
to do that role.
So
And
use
then
what you got, right? Use what you got at the moment. So yeah.
yeah, exactly, and then build on that, and then, with that, how does this client purchase that solution?
Mm-hmm.
Usually in consulting, it's one of three things that we kind of build our pricing around. It's an hourly rate,
Mm-hmm.
project-based rate, and then more of a value-based solution,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, for example, I do talent acquisition consulting. So I know what the salary, the full package, the full comp package
Mm-hmm.
of like a senior manager of talent acquisition makes
Right.
on
Right.
average, right? So if I'm talking to a company and they need somebody to do all of those duties, but they don't
Mm-hmm.
want somebody full time, they only want somebody part time to do it.
Right.
I have my basis of where that comp
Mm-hmm.
lies, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to need the benefits, so
Mm-hmm.
that's a huge value for that company that
Mm-hmm.
they're not adding that expense, right, onto
Right.
their. They're not adding that payroll expense on.
Mm-hmm.
So then I can work back from there to say, as long as I'm bringing that valuable ROI to the table for them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we're working out what those KPIs are, key performance indicators
Mm-hmm.
along the way, and I'm meeting those milestones, then I have an understanding of how much I can ask for in
Right.
that 6 month assignment or that 1 year part time assignment, whatever I
Mm-hmm.
want to do. So,
Yeah.
do you think I left anything out of that section?
No, I just had two thoughts for what I've done, and it certainly has evolved and it's improved over the years. But I currently have more of an Excel grid because one thing for my because I have a small team, but in marketing you have all these people who do very specialized skills. Like you might have someone that knows analytics or SEO or a content creator, and they all have, like you just said, like you look for industry average salaries or you look at what you're paying. So even if you're working with someone, and this is key early on, like if I'm working with someone who's just part time, right? They write for a certain amount of hours a week or whatever. I do need to build for the future, right? So I do,
Yes,
in a grid, I'll put them in there at the full salary, but I'll say it's a percentage of their time, right? It's 20% of their time. But
right.
but you also, let's say I have, a brother who's writing for me or something like, and maybe they don't make a lot of money. Well, you still should go with the salaries that you have. Like you need
Yes.
to plan ahead, right? You need to plan for
Yes.
growth, or you will be locked in this place where you're always sort of like trying to, it just doesn't work. So you do have to plan for where you're going. And I like what you're saying about, the trust and things like that. But that's the only
Yeah.
thing that came to mind, is that just really, planning for where you're going with your salaries, kind of,
Mhm.
even if you're like, bootstrapping it and, trying to do that, you got to get there in your initial conversations. Because
Absolutely.
a senior marketing person is one thing, but then so you have to find the blends that make sense for whatever it is you're replacing or doing. So, um,
Absolutely. Yeah. Knowing all of those key factors, right? And then you can also figure like you can do a cost plus pricing
mm-hmm,
structure, right? Which is, I
mm-hmm,
think, was what came to mind when you were talking about that,
mm-hmm,
is that I know that this is what I'm going to have to pay to have the graphic designer do that or have
mm-hmm,
the copywriter do that part of it,
right,
while, I figure out the media piece of it or whatever that is,
mm-hmm,
right? So you've got to factor in all of those costs
mm-hmm,
plus an ROI on top of that, which
right,
is, typically 20, 30%, but
mm-hmm,
it's not in stone as
right,
to where you can adjust that, right?
yeah,
And then you have your basic pricing kind of set
mm-hmm,
up and you can
yeah,
say, okay, well, if I need these 3 experts, I need somebody to come in and set up the data analytics for them,
mm-hmm,
and I know that's what their billable hours are, and it's
yeah,
gonna take them 10 hours to do this.
mm-hmm,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. And I'm a little conflicted about it. Like initially, you might underprice your own stuff, right? Your own services, because you're trying to trying to do whatever. So there's a real tight balance there. Like if you do that, be very cautious. You don't necessarily want to start at those prices. You want to show that you're, trying to grow things so there is, or it's a friend of
yes.
family. Like, I don't know, you need to be very cautious because you just mess yourself up a couple years down the road if you do that. So,
Absolutely. Your time is valuable.
mhm.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. So that leads us to tip number 2.
Yeah. So, tip two, I'm almost, I don't know if I'm stealing it. I'm sharing it from another source. So, I have a LinkedIn friend, who's Yoram Solomon, and he has a book, but he also has a podcast called The Trust Show. And I was looking at the post, and then I listened to this yesterday, and it really hit me as it relates to pricing. So I thought I would share tip number two here, a little bit for that, and see if that resonates. And I'll put a link to the podcast in our comments too, so
Oh,
people can check that
yeah.
out separately. And but it's interesting. So every space, every industry has its different levels apparently of like the extra value that customers place on trustworthy businesses. And one obvious would come like financial services. It's
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
a real obvious one, right? So there's a lot of people who do that, right? The level of trust that you need to have for that person is very high, right? So people will probably, and what seems to, there's like different things, but will pay a premium for that trust. So they don't bargain shop typically in
Right,
that business.
right.
They're most looking for someone who can deliver the expected results, which is directly related to trust. So that's a good, it's very interesting, and it sounds like there's a quick process for that. There's a 1, 2, 3 steps for that, but just to clarify, like, what is the trust premium for your market? So if you're doing marketing services, you do HR, like what is the trust premium? Like try to look out there, and do some evaluation of what that is, how much are people spending, that kind of stuff. So that's trust premium, and I think it's it's real. I'm still digging into it, but it was really interesting. And
Yeah,
those three
yeah.
steps to sort of figure that out is, one is survey your industry's trust premium. So understand how it varies in your field, and identify the factors in the highest trust premium segment. So, you know, within marketing, like the factors might be, you know, experience or case studies or different things like that. Like, what is
Mhm.
bringing them to these factors? Is it experience in their industry? Is it certifications in certain tools and technology? Like, try to get a sense of what is affecting that.
Mhm.
Experience with analytics, or and this is just my little bubble, but like there's things that might raise that trust premium. So then you
Yeah.
start to look at that customer assessment and you measure it, and there's tools, and I'll try to get some more things in the thing, but assess sort of those risks from the competitors, like if they're choosing reputation, recommendations, things like that. If they're making those choices, like what are the risks for that? So once you understand that, then you understand a percentage, right? And then you try to
Yeah.
make sure that you're in line with that. And if you find yourself lower, the concept was that you are not doing something you need to do with trust. And so then you start working it back into, okay, I have my pricing, right? Which we look at setting based on various ways. But if you're not getting it or you're losing to competitors, you have to step back and say, what do I look like online and in person? Do I look like somebody that people would refer? Do I have stories of success? So you start to
Mhm.
backtrack it into what needs to happen with that. And so this is, I'm going to work through this a little more, but it's kind of a process of building trustworthiness, putting this habit and understanding that across the board, because you can do sales all day long, right? And
Yeah.
how much better is it to do one good sale at the right value versus five that
Yeah.
aren't? So, I mean, you got to do some of this work up front as soon as you can. So, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to be said for that.
Mm-hmm.
I follow this business owner on LinkedIn who's always, it's called Sam Sales, and
Mm-hmm.
SAMSALES, Sam
Mm-hmm.
Sales. And she owns her own business, going in and consulting from a sales perspective to help sales teams get better at what they do.
Oh,
And
nice.
her whole thing is, show me you know me,
Hmm.
right? In order to build trust.
Okay.
And and I think that that is a way, especially if you're starting out in consulting
Mm-hmm.
and you don't have your first client yet
Mm-hmm.
for a case study or
Yeah.
anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
If you start to build trust through just the questions that you're asking in that
Mm-hmm.
discovery call,
Yeah.
will give them an indication, wow, that she gets me. She's asking these questions that are getting to the heart of where my pain is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
She understands that she's been down the block a couple of
Yeah.
times,
Mm-hmm.
and and that helps too, to build
Mm-hmm.
that trust level when you don't have all of those wonderful case
Mm-hmm.
studies.
Yeah.
You're fortunate to have 11 years in business, right?
13 actually. So
13.
going
Oh
on.
my
Yeah.
goodness.
I know.
I should not short you those 2 years.
No,
Those
because I feel.
were hard fought. So you've certainly got a lot of case studies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just making that pivot
Yep.
and relying a lot on what I've done overall in my career,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
but not necessarily what's been done at Impact per
Yeah,
se. So,
for sure.
I think that it's a different perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you bring to the table, and I think the more that you understand what's happening in that industry,
Mm-hmm.
um, the more comfortable you're going to feel about having those conversations, and you will
Mm-hmm.
automatically increase the value
Right.
that you're bringing.
Yeah. And I would say to this point in our show so far, like as it relates to price, value, and trust are sort of popping up at those words
Yeah.
that sort of put it together. So I like that. Maybe you can put Sam's sales in the link in the thing too. I would like to check that out. That'd be good to
Yeah,
see.
I definitely will.
So cool. So what about tip 3? You got something for us?
So, it goes to the psychology then of, you've built the trust factor. You
Mm-hmm.
understand, the perception
Mm-hmm.
the customer has of the value that you're bringing to the table.
Right.
So, how do you put that all together in like a proposal for the client?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I learned early on in my sales career was something called anchor pricing. And anchor pricing is where you really give the customer two options, maybe sometimes three options
Mm-hmm.
of ways that you could work together with them.
Right.
The goal is usually, though, that you want to position it in your favor so that they may lean towards the higher priced option because
Mm-hmm.
they see everything that they're not getting in the lower priced option. Because
Right.
if you don't set it up in, like, I always try to set it up in a matrix for them so they can
Mm-hmm.
actually compare, you know, the components. Okay, here in option one, this is what you're getting in little check marks going down the matrix. And then in option two, all of the matrices, just keeps going down a lot much longer
Right.
list. And you're like,
Right.
wow, there's value there
Mm-hmm.
because I am getting so much more for my
And you can
price.
start to look at like, is there something I really want right in there? So I
Yes.
do like those grids. Yeah.
Yeah. And you'll see
Mm-hmm.
that a lot in software.
Yeah.
Every time you go, to a site to look at, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I want a Zoom account, right? Or you've got your free Zoom account, and then
Mm-hmm.
you've got your premium Zoom account, and then you've got your webinar Zoom account.
Mm-hmm.
And they usually do those types of
Yeah.
matrix. And the reason is, is all about the psychology of anchor
Mm-hmm.
pricing,
Yeah.
so that you can really give the client the um, hit on what is most important to them
Yeah.
from a value perspective,
And
right?
it maybe this is something you can translate to services as well, but I do notice that when you have the free trials, you always have access to the higher level stuff, which you may not end up signing for. So I
Mm-hmm.
guess that's a really good thing too, is that free
Yes,
trial where you see things that you start, because if you find something you really love, you're going to be like, oh, I can't live without it now. So
exactly,
I
exactly.
wonder if there's a way to do that in service, but maybe I can think about that. So.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes it's like yourself is on the free trial
Mm.
almost.
Mhm.
So that would be
Sure.
moving from a project-based
Mhm.
consultant agreement
Mhm.
to maybe doing a longer term assignment,
Right.
where
Right.
it's a
Right.
3 month or 6 month or,
Mhm.
whatever. So to that point, it is kind of a try before you buy kind of thing,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
In that
Mhm.
perspective. So think about
Mhm.
it along those lines. And then I think also doing some A/B testing, right? And the other thing I didn't mention before when you're doing your pricing is think about where that client is based.
Mhm. That's true.
Um,
Yep.
because, my price to work with somebody in Florida might be different than my price to work with somebody in California.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And that's just because of the going rate, you
Yeah.
know, out
Mhm.
there. So you think about all of those things and make sure that you're taking that into consideration, the
Mhm.
pricing, and then do that A/B testing. So try it out with a couple of clients at the hourly rate of X,
Mhm.
and see what was the outcome of that, and
Mhm.
how much value did you actually bring as a
Right.
result of that. Should you raise your price,
Mhm.
or were you not able to deliver the metrics that you
Yeah.
thought that you could, and should you lower your
Mhm.
price accordingly?
And maybe even like if you had the same pricing structure, but how you presented it in your proposals or in your second conversation, whenever you do present pricing and packages of things, like that would be interesting. Like, what questions do you get? What do you even see on the call as the initial reaction when you show a three-tiered approach versus you show here's what I recommend for you? Like, yeah, there's a couple ways, right, to test that. The A/B testing can be, you know, in conversations, in your presentations, like
Yeah.
a couple places. Yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. And
Hmm.
then I think data, right? So if you on your website, if you have like your services outlined in those three buckets, hourly rate, project based, and then,
Hmm.
value packages, see where the traffic's going when they come
Hmm.
onto your website. What are they
Hmm.
clicking on most often?
Yep.
It kind of gives you an indication of, how they want to work with you,
Hmm.
right? So if they're going more towards that project all the
Hmm.
time, then okay, that's what's resonating best with my
Right.
audience,
Right.
and that is their larger area of interest. So that's where I should, focus more of my attention, to
Hmm.
working on those project based accounts.
Yeah.
And then, and any kind of industry surveys that you can do,
Hmm.
not just customers, but,
Right.
LinkedIn is great for polls,
Hmm.
you know,
Yep.
and you can see who's responding to your post. So you can look
Hmm.
and see, like what industry are they in to make sure
Hmm.
that you're getting the information that you want,
Hmm.
as a result of those polls. So if you can't do it
Yeah.
any other way, that's a free way of getting some information, just
Hmm.
to make sure that you're on the right track with things.
Yeah.
So, do some of that as well, get input.
I think, and Glassdoor is a nice place to see about when you're looking at if you're doing a service, like if it's a outsource or a fractional type of role for some company. Glassdoor is nice to see not just maybe what people are making at various companies, but what their roles really are. Because people will give you a lot of detail into, I was hired for this, but really they wanted this, or the good and bad. So that's a nice way too to do some of that research. I think is to get that. Um, and then with the what you mentioned about the when you can show three tiers or you show the project versus hourly, whatever. I always like the labels or the descriptions that tell you who this applies to, because sometimes you don't really know. Like, but if it says small business, early startup, this package of whatever is good for you, and I've seen that in a few. And
Yeah.
it's either like the small business package or the growth or the whatever. Some of those words are pretty powerful for psychology and actually truly
Yes.
representing what is a good fit, because all of the SaaS stuff, they want you to grow with them, as you
Yeah.
grow. So, and they'll figure out how to add things as that make sense
Right.
for you as you grow. So I like that stuff too, where you can really identify with whatever level it is.
Yeah, and people want, they want to feel like they're getting good value for the
Hmm.
money that they're spending, right?
Hmm.
And they don't want to be oversold.
Right.
So, to your point, a small
Yeah.
business person is going to want to know that you have a package that
Hmm.
works for them,
Hmm.
that's within a reasonable budget. You're
Hmm.
not asking for $30,000,
Right.
um, right? And
Hmm.
and so I think that is an excellent point to playing into the psychology of how
Hmm.
people buy. They
Hmm.
buy towards what's comfortable for them,
Hmm.
where they see themselves fitting in,
Yeah.
and where they see your solution fitting in.
And one more thing, like if people ask you, especially in service, if people
Mm.
ask you for discounts, you can, instead of saying yes or no or whatever it is, you can always say, if you pay 6 months up front, yes, I'll give you X%.
Mhm.
So find things that work for you, even, have some prepared information for that kind of stuff. So that's another one just popped in my head too, is prepare for that. Um,
Yes.
because there has to be a give. You can't just say yes, pay me less. I mean, it doesn't. It just devalues you. So.
Yeah, and a lot of times, I have previously on my previous sales life actually gone ahead and shown them a discount at the
Mm-hmm.
very start of it. So
Right.
showed them the true value of the package,
Right.
and
Yeah,
then
I like that.
where a discount has already been applied for them so that they
Mm-hmm.
can see that I'm coming with my best offer to
Mm-hmm.
the table,
Yeah. Mhm.
And, in the discovery call, you're going to get an idea of how they put a budget aside for this,
Mhm.
you know, and
Mhm.
what is that range? That's a comfortable range for them
Right.
to be able to spend on whatever it is you're talking about.
Mhm.
So you're
Mhm.
going to use that when you're doing the pricing and the proposal
Right.
to ensure that even if maybe it comes out that the value of the package was much above where
Mhm.
their budget is, but you've
Yeah.
been able to get it down
Yeah.
to
They stay
coincide with
where they
their
are. Yeah.
budget, it really lets them know that you are trying to work with
Yeah.
them, and that you want to be a true partner with
And
them. And I think
prepares you better
that's
for
very
renewals and
important.
things too, right? So, yeah,
Yeah,
that's true.
yeah,
Good deal.
yeah.
Well,
So
this was
anything else
good.
to add? I think we're right
Yeah,
at
we're
the
about over time, but I think I tried to interject some things, but I think we'll put a few links in this one. And if anybody wants to check out those other resources, this was good. This was helpful for me too. So,
Yeah, I hope everybody found it useful, and let us know what what was important to you, and what do you
mhm,
need us to be researching and talking about next. So
absolutely.
we'd love the input.
All right.
Thanks